Good morning. Welcome to the third installment of the Confidence for Lawyers Masterclass series. So if you didn't make the first two, the first one was about building confidence. The second one was about growth mindset and about the imposter syndrome. So we're going to wrap it up today, talking about 3 obstacles to becoming a confident lawyer. We're going to talk about blocks, boundaries, and bias. And one important point that I want to make when it comes to bias in particular, especially after the passing of Justice Ginsburg, which quite frankly destroyed me on Friday, is it's more important now than ever to have these conversations, to discuss bias. And for some people, it can be very uncomfortable. And I don't think that we gain anything in our lives that doesn't require discomfort. Going to law school was uncomfortable. You know, being a lawyer is often uncomfortable, but the rewards that you get from going through the discomfort and learning from it is, completely outweighs that discomfort. So if you're feeling uncomfortable as we discuss bias and we discuss these various topics, then that's completely normal and just work through it. All right. So on that note, let's start with a voluntary meditation. Sit up in your chair, back straight, or if you're on the couch or wherever you are, as long as you're not driving, put your hands in your lap and you're just going to close your eyes. And you're going to take a deep breath in through the nose. You're going to sigh it out the mouth. Deep breath in. Sigh it out. In. Out. One more deep breath in. Sigh it out. Now just let your breath go normal. In through the nose and out through the nose. And just noticing how you feel. Sitting in the chair, sitting on the couch, whatever is supporting you. Just notice how your breath feels going in and out. How your lungs expand and contract. How your belly fills up with air. And just take this time for yourself. Just know that you are supposed to be here right now. You don't have to do anything else. And just noticing your feet and your toes, and with your next exhale, just tell them to relax. Legs, thighs, hips, relax. Lower belly, lower back, relax. Solar plexus, middle back, relax. Your chest, your upper back, relax. Your hands, your wrists, relax. Your arms, relax. Your shoulders, where you're holding all that tension, let them drop and relax. Your neck, your throat, where you do all that talking from, relax. Your facial muscles, your jaw, relax. The top of your head, relax. And just noticing if there's any other areas of tension or gripping, just let it relax. And just notice how you feel, letting yourself relax, being in this moment, and know that you can come back to this moment anytime. And just taking a few more breaths, just noticing. I'm getting ready to end the meditation. Take one more big breath through the nose. Sigh it out through the mouth. Open your eyes. And if you're still awake, let's get started. So for those of you who have not joined me for the first two master classes, let me tell you who I am very quickly. I'm Shane Scott. I am the founder of the Spiritual Litigator LLC, and I'm also a partner at a mid-sized law firm. I am a bar association junkie, which means that I am very active in state bar. I'm very active in county bar associations. I'm active in the affinity bar associations. I'm active in various subgroups and committees. And so the judge that I clerked for 9 years ago affectionately called me a bar association junkie. I think that's a good title to have. I'm also a mindfulness practitioner. That means that I practice mindfulness. It's not a fancy title. I'm also an avid hiker. I try to hike 10 miles a weekend at least. And I'm also a fan of anime, crime dramas, scary movies, and WWE wrestling. So these are things that you needed to know. All right, so the objectives of today's masterclass are to discuss 3 mistakes to avoid when using mindfulness, 4 common negative reactions others may have to you setting boundaries and how to overcome them, and how imposter syndrome intersects with bias. And this is all important to being confident, because when you decide that you're going to be more confident, you're going to set boundaries and people may not like them. And also bias is something that is inherent in human nature. And to combat that and to build your confidence, you need to have an understanding of it fundamentally. So we're going to get into that. So to recap the last couple classes that we did. So the 3 keys to confidence that we discussed in the first one are mindfulness, mindset, and action. So mindfulness is the awareness of what is going on without judgment. All right, so that's pretty much, being aware. Meditating is a form of mindfulness, but that's not the only way to be mindful, but that's just one example. The mindset is the set of beliefs that you have that make up your attitudes and what you do. And action is taking action with the mindset that you have. And this comes down to the ABC cognitive model. So that was coined by Albert Ellis, an American psychologist, who came up with the activating event, something that happens in your environment that you have no control over, your beliefs, what you believe about that event, and the consequences. So what you feel, what you do, and what you create. And we used the example last time of the activating event can be receiving an assignment. And often we have these beliefs like, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw this up. And so the consequences are you feel anxious, you may procrastinate, and then from there, you may create this frenzy of activity to complete the assignment. And either you complete it and it's not that great, or you do a good job, but you keep going through that same cycle every time. So having an understanding of your ABCs and what your mindset is really fundamental to taking action from a managed mind. So we also discussed the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset last time. So when you have a fixed mindset, you have this core belief that characteristics such as talent and intellect are fixed at birth or become locked in by a certain age. So they believe that some people are naturally more talented and intelligent than others. And then there's a growth mindset that says there's this core belief that your most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. So your basic qualities, including intelligence and talent, can be cultivated by effort. This means that it's not set by birth, that we can all, through work, get to any position that we want to. And so we also discussed impostor syndrome. So that's a belief that one's achievements are undeserved, and they worry that they are likely to be exposed as a fraud. So that's a huge problem that a lot of people have. And the more that you have a growth mindset than a fixed mindset, the more that you can overcome that. So the first thing we talk about today are blocks. These are things that come up and block us from being more mindful and more confident. And these are the 3 mistakes that we often make. So when you decide, okay, I'm going to get into mindfulness, or I'm thinking about using mindfulness, but the first thing that comes up is I just don't have enough time. And when I used to think this too, like, yeah, I'd like to not be stressed out, but I don't really have time to work on it. But then I burned out and ended up in the hospital and ended up out of work for a week. I didn't have time for that either. But sometimes it's important to take care of it now instead of having it take care of you later. And so another example I'll use is a lot of times we say we don't have work. We have too much work to do, and then we don't have time to work on ourselves. So I don't know if any lawyers experienced working a 13-hour day, but only putting like 6 hours on a timesheet and having no idea where their time went. And then when they get home, they're grumpy around their family members, or they're completely checked out, they're checking their phones. And so a lot of that time is just mismanaged time because of a mismanaged mind. So that's one way that you can block yourself from being more confident or using mindfulness. Another thing is beating yourself up. So you're making mindfulness a thing that you have to do perfectly, but it's not like this form of enlightenment where you get it and you never experience negative emotions again. That's not how it works. It's not about being positive all the time. I think that's a really big misconception. No, I'm not positive all the time. I'm irritated a lot, actually. It's about choosing to pay attention to the present moment and without judgment. And it's about realizing when your mind is wandering and like bringing it back to the moment, being more focused. So being present while drinking your morning coffee, that's being mindful. Noticing your breath like we did and bringing yourself back to the moment instead of letting your mind race, that is being mindful. Sitting and following your breath while you're waiting for the judge to call your case, that's being mindful. Being present during a workout, that's being mindful. As long as you're in the present moment, that's really what you need to do. And sometimes the present moment can be unpleasant. And we often, as lawyers and as humans, experience challenged circumstances. But when you lose emotion and you feel bad, don't beat yourself up for not being perfect, but then beat yourself up for beating yourself up. This is not a perfect, linear, you become mindful and it ends. You really have to be kind to yourself and pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. And so if you fall off and you get mad at yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. The next thing is inconsistency. So mindfulness is like a workout for your brain. So you're not going to have one workout and have like broccoli one day and say, why am I not fit? Where are my six-pack abs? We know that it doesn't work that way. We know that you have to work out over time. You have to eat healthy over time. And sometimes you'll start, using mindfulness techniques, and then you will stop using them. And then you wonder why you get triggered. So an example I'll use is before the pandemic, I was hiking 10 miles just about every weekend. And then around March, all the parks were shut down. And so for about 2.5 months, I really wasn't doing much at all. I think a lot of us were in that boat. And so I came back for a 10-mile hike and I was dying the entire time. I felt terrible. I'm like holding the group back and like I'm huffing and puffing and gassed. And the reason is because I hadn't been doing it over time. I hadn't been working the hiking muscles and doing inclines and doing that heavy work. And so it was just a lack of consistency. And so the same thing goes, you want to do it consistently. And if you fall off for a little bit, that's okay. Don't think anything has gone wrong when you have a hard time going up that mental hill again. So boundaries. So a boundary is a limit defining you in a relationship to someone or something. And so common boundaries that lawyers should set are with clients, adversaries, partners, families, friends, and significant others. And so we'll use one example here. So we'll use the freeloader friend as an example, because I think we all have had at least one of these phone calls. So activating event is on a busy day, a friend calls saying he needs a contract, just something really quick. He says he does not want to pay an overpriced, greedy lawyer for something so simple. And so you might feel bad and you might feel like, oh, I don't want my friend to think I'm greedy. And so you're frustrated and you almost feel resentful because let's say, for example, you do the contract for free. You're just going to go ahead and resent your friend for taking advantage of you when really you could have just said no, but you were more afraid about your friend's feelings than your own boundaries. And so you can dispute the belief by asking good questions. Am I greedy if I want someone to pay for a service? And the answer is no. Would he ask the doctor to work for free? And do I really care what my friend thinks? You know, you got to be honest with yourself. Who matters more here? Because your friend's feelings, you know, don't pay the bills. So your effective new beliefs may be, my legal services are valuable and I don't provide them for free. Or the boundary that I set is, I don't provide legal services to family or friends. To some people that's too extreme, but I found that to just refer people out is a much better situation. But some people work fine with friends, and I commend them, but you just have to set boundaries with them. So 4 negative reactions to your boundaries. So let's say, for example, you tell the friend, you know what? Yeah, I can look at that. And here's my retainer. And as soon as I receive the signed retainer and the, you know, whatever the amount of money it is, I will take care of it. Well, you know, sometimes a friend might get angry, right? Because sometimes a boundary means someone in your life can't get away with certain controlling behaviors anymore. And they take it as unfair, or you taking advantage of them. And so they just get all offensive. And that's completely fine. That's what's happening. So you need to keep your foot down and understand that your work is not charity work. Your work is valuable. Another reaction is blame. You know, they may take it as a personal statement that, you know, that they're not good enough. So they're lashing out at you. And so they start to blame you and say, look, you know, this is ridiculous. I just need you to look at this, you know? Okay, sorry. Manipulation. So, you know, they twist around, you know, your boundary. They try to make it mean something bad about you. They say things like, I just need you to look at this. Like, this is ridiculous. And again, you know, you gotta hold the line. The 4th one is leaving. So that friend, you might send them the retainer and never hear from them again. And sometimes that's for the best, because you don't need certain people in your life that are going to take advantage of you. So let's talk about positive reactions to your boundaries. So let's say, for example, you send the retainer, they pay the money, and there you go. There was no problem. They agree with you that they should absolutely pay for the service. Let's use a different example for the second one, right? People who are in relationships with lawyers, or 2 lawyers in a relationship, often will come home from work and they don't want to talk to anybody, but maybe their partner doesn't understand that. And so the partner, you know, starts speaking to them and like wants to know about their day, but really you just need a moment. A boundary that can be set is, hi, I will say hello when I get in the house, but I need maybe 30 minutes to change into workout clothes, get on the treadmill, or just sit in the dark for a little bit, whatever it is. I just need a moment. Can we set this to where we just don't communicate for the first 30 minutes after I get home? And for some people, that will change and will make the dynamic in that relationship a lot better. Another example is growth. So continuing that relationship boundary, because the boundary was set, now there's more of a fundamental understanding of why there's all these arguments at the end of the workday, or passive aggressive behavior. And so that relationship can actually grow because there was a healthy boundary that was set. So let's talk about bias. And I think one thing that comes to mind is something that I noticed, actually, article from NBC this morning that kind of illustrates the problem with bias. There was a Wells Fargo executive that said they couldn't hire minority talent because there wasn't a talent pool. And so that really comes from this fundamental idea that, you know, bias, that comes from this biased idea. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. So unconscious or implicit bias. It is a preference for a person or group of people that individuals unknowingly have in the back of their minds, which influences a person's behavior. And where it comes from is we have this evolutionary human fight or flight response. And we've talked about that in the past 2 master classes, where people have to categorize each other in order to survive. So back in the caveman days, you would see a tiger and you would know to flee. And if you saw someone harming a child, you would know to fight. And so you evolutionarily have this ingrained in you to determine, okay, do I need to run from this person? Is this person safe or not? And so it's much easier for your brain to just categorize people in order to survive. Otherwise, you'd have to turn on your brain every time you saw someone walking on the street. But over time, this need to categorize leads to stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination. And the unconscious bias can impact an employee's life. So there's this idea of confirmation bias. So there's this tendency to search for, interpret, focus on, and remember information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. And any evidence that is in contrast or conflicts with your preconceptions are disregarded. So using a simple example, if someone has an unconscious bias that women are less competent in the workplace, they're going to notice their mistakes, but discount their successes. That's a very simple example, but it happens very often. So 2 examples of unconscious bias when it comes to selection of people would be a resume study that was done several years ago, where they took a bunch of resumes of individuals, some which had traditionally white sounding names and some that had traditionally black sounding names like Jamal. And so they found that the individuals with the white sounding names had 50% more callbacks than people with black sounding names, even though the resumes were exactly the same. Another example is blind auditions. So that study found that musicians who auditioned behind a curtain, where you could not see the gender of the participant, would significantly increase the chance that women would be put on an orchestra than when they could see them and when the bias could occur. So biased behaviors include microaffirmations, such that are tiny acts and gestures of inclusion, caring, and graceful acts of listening. So that's when someone is taking an interest in your work, they're mentoring you, they're taking you to lunch, they're introducing you to other people in the legal industry. And then there's microaggressions, statements, actions, or incidents regarded as instances of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group such as racial or ethnic minority. And what you'll find is these are things that people have, in most cases, no idea that they're doing and no idea that they are offensive to people of a marginalized group. And we'll talk about some examples. So, common microaggressions. You speak so well. This is something that is said to people who may have accents, who may look like they should have an accent and they don't, people of color, and often they're told that you're articulate, you speak well. The reason that's a microaggression, the reason that that's problematic is the person who's speaking, it suggests that they did not expect the person to speak well in the first place. And that's based on their first impression of their racial background or of their national origin. And so the recipient of that phrase is being told that you don't belong here. So they have this feeling of isolation from that person and a feeling of isolation from their own group. So it's almost like a double whammy. So even though that sounds like an innocuous statement, it actually has so many deeper meanings, especially to people who've been hearing it their entire lives. The next one, I cannot be racist, my best friend is whatever, best friend's black, my best friend's gay, whatever the person is. So I often tell people when I'm doing trainings, please just don't ever say this in a deposition. So every person, regardless of their background, has biases. I have biases, everybody has them. So this is not limited or picking on any particular group. However, when someone says, you know, my best friend is this, that doesn't mean that you can't have an overall bias towards a group as a whole. So that's almost saying that, you know, the gender pay gap can't exist because everybody has a mother, but apparently misogyny and gender pay gap exists. So what happened here, right? There's a disconnect. There's a bias against a particular group, regardless of who that person happens to love or who that person happens to be friends with. I don't see color. I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot more today than anything else. And I think it's very important to say that, just like with the last phrase, it would be nice if we lived in this utopia where we really just didn't pay attention. But the fact is we do. We do notice differences. We do notice people of different backgrounds. And so we have inherent biases to react a certain way. And so when you're saying, when someone says, I don't see color, it completely takes away the experience of people who are of a certain background and it almost marginalizes their experiences. So that's why this phrase can be so problematic. All right, so the next one, oops, wrong person. So confusing one minority for another just shows a lack of inclusion. Where are you really from? Although this may, it may be seen to, you may be genuinely curious about somebody's background. But remember, in the workplace, there's really no reason for you to ask the question. And also it's just this, you take it from curiosity to an interrogation when really the person, they really are from that local town. And it doesn't matter if they look like they're from another place, that's not where they identify. Your name is too hard to pronounce. So because of workplaces being so diverse, people have diverse last names or first names, and refusing to learn their names shows a complete disregard of their background, and just, says that, I can take the time to learn Daenerys Targaryen and Tchaikovsky and all these different names, but I'm not going to learn yours because it's not important to me. That's the message that the recipient is getting. And finally, you look so young. This sounds innocuous, and I've had older people in training say to me, well, I like to hear that. Any comments about someone's appearance is generally, when it's based on a protected class, such as age or race or gender, is basically saying you look so young, ... You don't belong here because of your appearance. So these are microaggressions. They may be surprising to some people, or they may be surprising to no one, but these are things that are often said on a regular basis to people of marginalized groups. So why do we care about this, right? Some people would say to me, well, you know what? These things happen, get over it. The reason people can't get over it is because of this idea of stereotype threat. So there were several studies that were done by psychologists that found that when people are confronted with evidence or a reminder, whether overtly or implicitly, that they are different, they are often in fear of confirming negative stereotypes about their particular group. So, for example, they took a large group of individuals, white and Black, and they gave them the verbal section of the GRE. For some of the groups, they told them, the stereotype threat group, they told them that this test is diagnostic of intellectual ability. They told the non-stereotype group that this is just a laboratory problem-solving task. And the third one was more of a control group. And what they found was when they were told that this was a test of intellect, the Black students performed poorly. However, they performed better on the non-stereotype. This is just a problem-solving test. There were subsequent several tests that test this whole idea of stereotype threat. They found that a study of chess players, when the women were specifically told that this was going to be a tournament against men, they performed poorly. But when they performed, when they were not told specifically this is going to be against men, and it was just a general chess game, they performed fine. Another example was a golf game where they were told, one group was told, this golf game is based on natural athletic ability, and the Black players actually performed better. But when they were told that the golf game was based on intellect, they performed worse. So why do we care about all of this? Because microaggressions matter, because every time they occur, it can unconsciously trigger this stereotype threat, and that heightens this imposter syndrome effect. And people have said to me, Shane, everybody experiences some type of imposter syndrome. Everybody experiences this. However, because of these additional aspects of bias and stereotype threat and microaggressions, it's a constant fight to not fall into a negative stereotype, which leads to negative performance or poorer performance. So more examples are a 2014 study combined data from interviews and a group of over 100 studies of gender bias and intersectionality. And really quick, intersectionality is this theory that if you are a member of several affinity groups, you are even more likely to experience bias at a higher level. So for example, a female, Black female, or a Latina female, or a gay minority would have intersectionality, where you have additional strikes against you and additional opportunities to have unconscious bias experiences. So there were 4 basic patterns of gender bias that these studies found: the prove it again, the tightrope, and the maternal wall, and the tug of war. So really quick, because I could talk about this for hours, but we'll do this really quick. So women under the prove it again status must deliver twice as much evidence of competence as men in order to be seen as equally competent. So there are these ideas of double standards, right? So women are presumed to be incompetent until proved otherwise, right? So incompetent until proven competent, whereas men don't have to come up with that. They're already considered competent when they walk into the room, or walk into the courtroom, or walk into the client's room. Double standards. Next is recall bias. So when mistakes are made, which are inevitable in any workplace, they're more likely to be recalled for the women who make the mistakes, whereas the men's mistakes may not necessarily be recalled as quickly. And it's brought up over and over again. So it's something to remember for law firm leaders. Like, if you're really focused on a mistake somebody made, ask yourself why. Ask yourself why you're so focused on that, because bias may be playing a part. Leniency bias. So this works both ways. So there may be objective rules that tend to be applied more rigorously to women and more leniently to men. So there was a story that was in American Bar Association Commission on Women, where someone, I think it was like someone forgot to do something with a letter in particular, and the partner came down and yelled at her for not doing this thing with the letter. You know, whether it was the way it had to be sealed or whatever it was this whole meltdown. Whereas a man who made the same mistake was not treated as harshly. Attribution bias. So women's successes are often attributed to luck, whereas men are attributed to skills. So he's skilled, she's lucky. Shifting standards or polarized evaluations. So like superstar women tend to receive even higher evaluations than superstar men, but women who are merely excellent, right, at the baseline or a little bit above baseline, get much lower evaluations. And then finally, casuistry, and I had to actually Google how to say it. It is casuistry. If a job requires experience and education, people tend to choose a man with more education and say, look, we wanted someone with more education. But if a woman has more education and is competing against the man for that particular position or job, they tend to choose a man with more experience and cite the importance of experience. So it just, the scales kind of change depending on who is up for that particular position. So that was a really interesting study. The tightrope. So women are often walking a tightrope between seeing as too feminine to be confident or too masculine to be likable. So that whole idea of walking this tightrope of, I don't want to be too feminine where people don't see me as competent because of the biases that are already there. But I don't want to be too masculine to be labeled as, you know, as a Black female. I don't want to be an angry Black woman. You don't want to be a fiery Latina. You don't want to be seen as being too aggressive, which on the other hand, when a male is more aggressive at work, it's seen as professional. So that's a tightrope that women often walk. The maternal wall. Women have children. And there's descriptive bias that mothers are not seen as a good fit for a difficult career. And then there's prescriptive bias, the association between motherhood and a perception of lack of competence and commitment. There are many women who say that men will ask them in the workplace. Women lawyers have been asked by men, you know, are you staying? Are you feeling guilty for being at work right now and not being with your child? I mean, they actually are asked these questions in the workplace. And these things, as I said before, just add to that whole stereotype threat, which will hinder your performance over time. The tug of war. So that occurs when gender bias leads to conflict among women. So women who experience gender bias sometimes distance themselves from other women in order to avoid negative bias consequences based on gender. So it's almost like this Highlander, there can only be one type of, situation. And if there's a workplace that is not very diverse and there's only 2 or 3 women, they may feel that they have to distance themselves so that they're not experiencing bias by being associated with the other woman, because they've taken all this time working against the bias, and now this other person may remind the men that work there that they're a woman. And so it's a very unfortunate thing that happens. So other challenges, a lot of people, women and people of color, feel isolated in their respective workplaces, especially at law firms. There may be issues of disrespect, disrespectful comments, and just general racial stereotypes. So general bias statements, we talked about the microaggressions, also assumed to be janitors or assumed to be staff. And again, people have said, don't take it seriously, but when it happens all the time, it's this whole "you don't belong here, you shouldn't be here" type of belief system that is reinforced over time. And then accent discrimination. There have been many people who have accents, who people find it necessary to make comments about their accent. And there was even a story in an American Bar Association study where a Korean male lawyer was asked to come and meet a client. And the only reason he was asked to meet the client was because the client was Korean. There was no reason. He wasn't going to be assigned any substantive work. So it was very awkward for him. He goes back to his office, and later that day, the partner calls and leaves a message, basically speaking in like Asian gibberish, like making like offensive sounds to making it sound like Asian dialect. This is a partner at a law firm leaving this message on this associate's voicemail. And so this is stuff that happens. This was documented in an American Bar Association study. So those types of things can be very challenging, can completely increase imposter syndrome, and can lead to attorneys leaving the law. So these are the ways to overcome it, and we talked about it in the last one, is to have a growth mindset, because ultimately, because bias is an inherent human trait, and because of the nature of law firms, there are going to be some law firms that are better at meting out bias and discrimination than others. And so regardless of where a person of color or a woman or any person of a marginalized group ends up, they have to be aware of what's going on. And also, non-minority attorneys need to be aware that this is going on. So when they see it and when they see people react, they understand that, no, the person's not overreacting. This is something that has been happening to them almost their whole career. So awareness is a very important part of this entire process, and as a person of color, I have to identify what my triggers are. What are the things that irritate me, and how do I process those so I'm not showing up angry all the time? Because showing up angry and bitter is never going to solve the problem. Having a perspective. So once you're aware of the problem, you can have a perspective over, okay, what is the best way to show up? What is the best way to process what's happening? Can I show up angry, or can I make sure that I am doing, for me, more anti-bias and more anti-discrimination training so that people can understand what's going on? Those are different choices you can make, but you have to have awareness and perspective in order to make them. And finally, taking action. So you're aware of what's happening, you have a perspective about it, and now you're taking action. If you take action from an unmanaged mind, you're only going to create the same situation over and over again. But when you are taking the time to be mindful about what's happened, processing it, and then going from there, you're more likely to have a better outcome. And the same thing for non-minority attorneys is to be aware of it, to have a perspective, and to take action, to speak out against these things when you see it. I think that's also a very important thing, because all of us are in this together, and we can't call it out if nobody is supporting the call out. So mindfulness tools, things that can help you become present, because without presence, you don't get the awareness, and without the awareness, you don't have change. So meditation, just like we did at the beginning, that is probably my number one, to slow down, to be aware of what's happening, and to recognize that no matter what, nothing is happening in that particular moment. Yoga is another way to become present. And so there are countless free YouTube videos out there that can get you started if you would like to do that. Gratitude journaling. Studies have shown that taking just 5 minutes a day to write down what you're grateful for keeps you focused. Remember those ABCs, right? So you have activating events, you have your beliefs, and you have your consequences. If you are replacing those beliefs that nothing ever works out for me, everybody's out to get me, I'm never going to get this right, if you replace that with things worked out today, I had a very good discussion with the partner today, I won this motion, focusing on those things can really change that negative belief loop. And finally, hiking, that's something that really takes you out of everything that's going on in the world and puts you back into nature. It's very centering, and I recommend it to everybody. So how do we make all of this that I've discussed, not just today, but in the last two master classes work for you? So you want to ask yourself, what are the specific situations or issues that you want to improve? What does not being confident look like and feel like for you? How are you showing up? What specific emotion do you observe in yourself that leads you to not feeling confident? So is it fear? Is it frustration? Is it overwhelm? What is it? And you can really feel that if you're meditating and you're paying attention to how these feelings feel. That's why they're feelings, because you can actually feel them. You know that you're feeling overwhelmed because of what's going on in your body. And what actions do you take or not take as a result of that lack of confidence? So if you're overwhelmed, are you procrastinating, or are you overworking? Are you spending, 6 hours on something that you can only put 3 hours on the timesheet for because it shouldn't have taken 6 hours, but you're spending a lot of that time freaking out and going in circles? So let's talk about alternatives. What would be the alternative to your experience? What would the opposite look like? So if your current experience is procrastinating, getting on your phone, getting distracted with Reddit or whatever your social media poison is, watching YouTube videos, reading political ads, that'll drive you crazy. What is the thing that you go to, and what would it look like if you didn't go to that? How much would you get accomplished? How much would you get done? And what would it look like if a confident person was in the situation? What would they believe? What would they feel? What would they do? And what would they not do? So maybe a confident person is going to show up in a completely different way than you do right now. And what would it look like if you were confident in these areas? So to answer that and to help you with that, I'd like to invite you to join my 6-week lawyer confidence group coaching program. It starts October 4th, 2020. And each week we would do a guided meditation similar to the one that I did at the beginning of this, a 10-minute video lesson, and a 1-hour group coaching call every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, just like the time slot of this masterclass. What you would do is define your why so that you can have a compelling reason to show up and create massive change in your life. Define what you want in order to cultivate certainty and clarity so that you move towards what you want effectively. Define the obstacles of what you want so you can prepare and overcome them. I discussed some of them today, but you have to identify what specifically is holding back for you. And create a sustainable confidence mindset that will allow you to take inspired action towards your goals in a way that makes it almost certain that you will achieve them. It has to be sustainable. You can take a lot of steps now, but if you don't have your mindset together and you haven't been mindful about where you are, you're just going to create the same situations over and over again. So the cost of this program is $19.99, and the link to this to get more information and to sign up is bit.ly/confidentlawyergroup. And it's going to be in the chat if you want to get more information. So who should join this program? Lawyers who want to close the gap between where they are and where they want to be in their careers. So there's always a goal that we have. There's always somewhere you want to be, whether you want to be a judge, whether you want to join a Fortune 500 company, you want to be in-house, you want to run a nonprofit, you want to be attorney general, whatever it is, you want to close that gap between where you are and where you want to be. And confidence is the way to get there. And that is all about being mindful, working on your mindset and taking action from there. Lawyers who want to remove doubt about their abilities. We all have some doubts. I still have doubts, but working on that is fundamental to getting to where you want to be. Lawyers who want to improve their focus and productivity. And lawyers who want to stop waking up at 4 a.m. and thinking about everything that could go wrong. I mean, this has happened to every lawyer I've talked to. The more confident you are, the less likely you're going to wake up worrying because you know that everything is okay. Who should not join this program? So lawyers who have a fixed mindset and believe nothing can change. Lawyers who are unwilling to feel discomfort in order to grow confidence. Lawyers who do not want to do the inner work necessary to improve their lives. And finally, lawyers who do not believe that characteristics such as gender, race, or sexual orientation can impact someone's success in the legal profession. We talked about that. I'm very passionate about anti-bias, anti-discrimination, and anti-harassment, and not everybody's on board with that, and that's fine. This is just not the program for you. So what do you need? A pen and paper, a computer or smartphone, and an internet connection, a minimum of 2 hours per week, and a growth mindset and a desire to change. So recommended, but not required. I recommend everybody read Mindset by Carol Dweck. That is where the fixed mindset and the growth mindset comes from. I think it was very transformational for me to have an understanding that some things that you think are fixed are not fixed, and everything can be improved if you put the time in. Take the Clifton Strengths Assessment. This is not required, but I think that it is extremely helpful to identify your strengths, things that you are the best at, and also to know what your weaknesses are so you know to stop spinning your wheels on things and either taking the time to improve them or outsourcing them or delegating them to other people. So again, sign up now if you're interested, bit.ly/confident lawyer group. And also you can find me online. So spirituallitigator.com, Instagram.com/spirituallitigator, Facebook.com/spirituallitigator, or you can contact me at info@thespirituallitigator.com. So if there are no questions, I thank everyone for their time. I know everybody's time is valuable. I hope everybody is staying safe. And yeah, so stay safe, stay healthy, and stay mindful. Have a great day, everybody.